Over the course of history, war has become a part of human nature. Many acts of terror and violence are committed during war, with the largest impact made by the tragedy of the Holocaust. Released in 1993, Steven Spielberg's cinematic masterpiece, Schindler's List, explores the horrors of warfare and its lead up to the events of the Holocaust. It depicts real-life events of World War II and the implications they have on the lives of innocent civilians. Schindler's List delves into the inhumane conditions of the Jewish people during World War II, who suffered at the hands of the Nazi regime through the eyes of a businessman who was a part of the Nazi Party, Oskar Schindler. Despite this, he was responsible for saving 1,200 Jews from being tortured and executed. The film focuses on the life of Oskar Schindler's work and his time in the Nazi Party, and shows how his perception of the war changes over the course of the film. During the beginning, Schindler does not care much for anything besides profiting off the war. He hires Jews for work, as they would be cheaper to use, and pays them in pots rather than money, as money has no value in the ghettos. As the film progresses, Schindler begins to see the brutal conditions of the Jews and that they went through under the Nazis, as he begins to grow a sense of care for his workers. After the destruction of the Krakow ghetto, the Jewish people were forced to move to the new Plazau labor camp, where they were bound for certain death. But Schindler convinces Commandant Amon Goeth to build his own subcamp to house his workers. This goal initially was not intended to save the lives of the Jewish, but rather to keep his workers alive so he could run his business. However, his mind is changed and is focused on saving as many Jewish people as he can. This film was illustrated to show the events of World War II and the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the most horrific period during World War II, whereby millions of Jewish people were systematically murdered. It began with the hateful and anti-Semitic propaganda and campaign against Jewish people that was put out by the Nazi regime. Jewish people were the minorities of society during the late 30s and early 40s, and were the target of hate speeches and campaigns, and soon became the targets of mass killings. Schindler's List really engages with the audience and makes it feel like the viewers are there, experiencing the terrors of being a Jewish person in World War II. The message that the film conveys revolves around various themes. Firstly, Spielberg shows that the dehumanization of man and what it does to both soldiers and civilians. During the evacuation of the Krakow ghettos, the, the viewers are shown Nazis mercilessly killing any Jews that either don't follow orders or try to escape. Two scenes put things into perspective. One, first of all, a one-armed Jewish worker is put to death claiming he would be useless as he is an amputee. He keeps repeating the same sentence over and over again, "I'm an essential worker." This comes to show that despite being a living person, the man was not considered healthy but rather useless because he was missing an arm, and being killed over this minuscule fact shows how atrocious the living conditions during World War II were. Another scene in the film that also relays the message of the loss of faith in humanity is where Commandant Amon Goeth executes a Jewish worker because she was arguing with the soldiers about the construction of military barracks that were being built for the Nazis, yet it was executed despite being correct. Here, the harsh truth and realities of war, of what war does to people, is brought out, and how war affects the lives of people. However, war does not only bring out the worst in people, but also can bring out the good. This is seen through Schindler's actions and perception throughout the film. He undergoes a transition from an uncaring, money-hungry businessman who wants to profit off the war, but slowly becomes worried about his workers and focuses on saving as many as he can. Since the Nazis' main goal was to eradicate all Jewish people off the face of the earth, the sub-camp made by Schindler in his factory became a safe haven for them, the one place on earth that reminded them of their humanity. The History of the Holocaust by Pat Morgan is a great academic source that goes into depth about the Holocaust. It describes from beginning to end of the Nazi power and influence to the build-up of the Holocaust and the use of concentration camps which were used to systematically kill the Jewish people. Morgan discusses the reasoning of the Holocaust and why it happened in the first place. The politics involved in the formation of the National Socialist German Worker Party, later to be known as the Nazi Party, who embraced the policy only those of German blood may be citizens of the state. Accordingly, no Jew may be a member of the nation. This was a large factor that shaped the foundations of the systematic killings. The racism and anti-Semitism that took place was also the leading argument and justification as to why Jewish people were being killed. Soon after, the concentration camps were made to import the Jewish people into them. It's important to distinguish between the so-called extermination camps, those set up by the Nazis in Poland purely to process and kill masses of people. These concentration camps were only the beginning of the tragedy to come, the final resolution as it were called, where millions of Jewish people lost their lives for just existing. This reading influenced my viewing of the film by pointing out the atrocities of warfare and reinforces the idea that a war changes the living conditions around us and changes the way people behave. It throws us into a world where nothing is the same and very little around will make sense. Soldiers become familiar with the concept of killing and death, while innocent civilians who get caught up in the warfare try to make sense of what's happening, all while trying to keep sense of their humanity.